Okay, so we'll get started with our monthly online meditation group. We are going to go through the practices as always. I always follow the same procedure most of the time, starting with the life force arousal technique, the Kriya Pranayama, and Jyoti mudra. And in between those, I may spend some time doing chanting through the chakras or alternate nostril breathing, or simply sitting quietly, observing my internal and external environment. And one little thing I want to talk about before we get into our actual practice today is what your inner state, how to work with your inner state. What do I mean by that? Well, over the years, what you're going to find is that you are going to be able to do the meditations, and they are going to allow you to be calmer and clearer, and they're going to allow you to direct your attention more fully inward. Okay? And that's what the techniques are meant to do. But there will eventually come a time when you'll think to yourself, or you'll feel, all right, well, I'm calm and I'm clear, but these thoughts keep arising. Even when I hit a really clear state, thoughts will arise, or I'll be distracted by something. And this is one of the reasons why a few teachers have said that the techniques themselves are like preparing a meal, whereas sitting in the silence after the techniques are like eating that meal or enjoying that meal. So as you go through meditation, you don't want to simply just prepare something wonderful to eat through the meditation techniques and then throw away the meal. You want to learn, appreciate the silence that's been generated after the practice. And you personally have to learn how your inner states work. This is one of the important points of meditation and Kriya practice, is that you're going to learn these basic techniques, which everyone learns. You might even learn advanced techniques, which everyone learns. But at the end of the day, you have to learn how to best utilize the silence generated from the technique so that you can go deeper into it and explore it more fully. Okay. So for example, one of the individuals I've been working with on a monthly basis through a Kriya training process, we had a discussion a few weeks ago, and a phrase came to me that I never really thought of before, but it really helps to express what I'd like to encourage you to start exploring. And that is learning to hold your mental breath. All right? And this relates to the practice of yoga, because we know they all say that when you can stop your physical breath, or the more subtle your physical breath becomes, the quieter the mind becomes, because the mind is linked to the breath. But it doesn't just have to go that way. It can go the opposite way, which means the quieter your mind becomes, the stiller your breath will become. So they play off of each other. So you need to think of this idea of stilling your mental breath, or holding your mental breath. And to understand this, try to imagine a time where you were having a conversation with someone and they kept talking and you really had something you wanted to say. You wanted to add to the conversation. So you weren't really present, you were just waiting to talk. But still, you understand the feeling because you just had to get something in there. And so in a sense, you were kind of holding your breath to keep from talking, right? And that took effort because you really wanted to share what was so important to you. But you could do it that way, all right? Now when it comes to holding the mental breath, when you are meditating, you'll notice that when you get really clear, there'll still be thoughts that come through the mind. There'll still be ideas that arise, as if out of nowhere, as if you have no control over it. But you actually do have control over it. You just have to practice it and work on it. And so what you have to learn to do is, in your own mind, figure out, what do I need to do to just for a moment say, I don't need to think about these things, even if it's just for a few seconds. I just need to be quiet, right? And again, that's going to be different for you. But for me, the way it worked was I had the idea that my mind was having a conversation, And I just had to just hold my mental breath, just to see what's it like to experience that silence. And one of the reasons we don't experience that silence is because by experiencing that silence, it's scary, because it's all those thoughts and all those little things that come and they go that make you feel comfortable, like you're in your own home. You like being in your own home, hopefully, because there's all the things around you that you're used to that make you think, okay, this is who I am, and whatnot. So the same thing occurs with your thoughts. That's your mental home. And so it can be scary to go out from that mental home, to leave those thoughts behind. And some people will be adventurous, and they'll learn to do that. And it takes time. So at first you might ask yourself, all right, how can I just turn it off? And it might even be a simple act of will, in the same way that when you're talking, you just hold your breath, right? So it might take a simple act of will. And you need to figure out for you, what kind of mental gymnastics do you have to do to really click those thoughts off? And then after that, you get a little bit of success. And again, doing the meditation procedures will help out immensely. So that's why we do these. We have to remember to strengthen our capacity to exist in this silence. But once you have a bit of success, maybe you will hold the mental breath for 3 seconds. That's all it was, 3 seconds. But in that 3 seconds, you caught a glimpse of complete silence. You caught a glimpse of the fact that, wow, I still existed, even though I wasn't thinking all these random useless thoughts or all these things that seem so important to me. And then in that 3 seconds, you remember that. And then next time you try to work it a little bit more. All right, well, how can I hold it for just a little bit longer? And it may be that you notice after you do a Kriya Pranayama that it happens, that you can go a little bit longer. It may be that after you do Jyoti mudra, that you notice that silence. You're able to kind of flow into that silence with much more ease. And it's not that it may be, that's usually what happens. But you have to watch these things. So for you, working Kriya Pranayama, doing Kriya Yoga, doing any spiritual practice really, you have to remember it's not automatic. Meaning, sure, you can use the techniques for relaxation, for rejuvenation. And that's fine, because we all need that. We live in a stressful culture, most of us. Most people don't get enough sleep, so it's good to kind of get that rejuvenation. But to get to the meat of the spiritual practice, it's not about putting yourself into a trance state, or a state where you say, all right, I've gone through all these repetitions of Kriya Pranayama, or I've gone through all these mantras, now I'm just going to zone out. It's not about zoning out. If you want to zone out, go watch TV. Actually, don't do that, because that just makes it worse. If you want to zone out, go hang out in nature. Just observe nature. That'll be a little bit better. But the point being is that you need to be involved in the process. For example, talking to my teacher at one time, he said, someone asked me one time, he said, I do these techniques and they don't seem to work. And the teacher said, well, are you actually working the techniques, or are you just hoping that, kind of like a machine, you put a quarter in and then you get everything that you need, or 50 cents, whatever it might be. So you have to stay engaged in the process. And that requires that you learn to explore with more intensity. All right, how can I hold this stillness? And even if you can't hold the stillness, how can I hold my awareness such that I see what's happening, I see the experiences, but I am still aware of the fact that I am this formless, bodiless, timeless observer of all of this. Okay? And it doesn't even have to mean that you are this way all the time. For example, in mythology, in even the Gayatri mantra, it talks about the 3 worlds. When it talks about the goddess, that she rules over the 3 worlds. And they break these down into earth, atmosphere, and beyond. And that's just that's symbolism. The 3 worlds are deep sleep, dreaming, and wakefulness. All right. So the process of us consciousness is existing in deep sleep, which seems at times to be oblivion, but it's not. You can learn to become aware of that. Dreaming, and oftentimes when you're caught up in your thoughts and emotions, you're dreaming in a sense. And then the wakeful state. And what is the wakeful state? That's when you are aware. You are not caught up in anything. You are the observer. You know what you are. That's the awake state. Things can still be going on around you, but as long as you are conscious, then you've got it. I don't remember if I talked about this last time, but it's a point worth repeating. Many people want to escape into nirvikalpa samadhi. That's total annihilation. They're just gone. They want to escape into that. And there's a lot made of that in texts and teachers talking about it. But that's not the end of the game. That's partial. That's the halfway point. Because to be fully, completely aware or awake or complete, let's just say complete, you access that state of clarity, that state of stillness, and then you learn to bring it into your daily life. So right now, having this conversation or listening to me, are you clear, awake, and still? Fine, you're bringing it into your daily life. Are you nervous and tense and thinking about, am I going to do it right? What am I going to do after I get done? I'm hungry. If you're distracted by all these other things, then you need to work on it a little bit. And so eventually what happens is you learn to experience that state of clarity, timelessness, in all of your activities, whether you're oblivious in deep sleep, whether you're dreaming, or whether you're wide awake. But it all comes down to this idea of learning to exist, to realize that you can exist in that space where there are no thoughts, where there's no defining characteristics, where there's no one saying, you are Linda, or you are Prabha, or you have this history, so therefore, you can know who you are. It's learning to feel safe in that spaciousness and realizing that you're not going to annihilate yourself by doing that. You just get perspective on your personality and your life situation, right? That's really what happens there. And it's a very normal process that we all go through. It's part of growing up. So, our body goes through child to adolescent to adult to old age and so on. Well, our inner consciousness does that same thing. It's just some people don't make it to old age, or some people don't make it to that level of wisdom. Why? Because they die too soon. And what do I mean by they die too soon? They shut down. So I'm not talking about physical death. I'm talking about they lock themselves up at a particular stage of development. And you see that all the time. People who act like children, people who act like adolescents. Very few people act like adults, and very few people act like wise adults. So you want to really encourage yourself to continue living, to continue evolving, and staying involved in the practices, essentially, right? So as you learn what you've learned, many of you have taken classes that we've done, or many of you have downloaded the classes that are at Astral Vedic Astrology under the Learn Kriya Yoga tab, or maybe you've just watched the videos on YouTube. But the point is, the principles and the techniques. But now you have to remember that you personally have to ask yourself, well, what do I need to do to really stay engaged in these techniques? One good friend of mine who's an excellent meditator, and one thing he still does is he has a timer, and he sets it for 4 minutes or 5 minutes. And even, he's going through the processes. He knows all the processes, and he can do it, without anyone guiding him. He's been doing it for years. But sometimes he'll get a timer out, and he'll set it for 5 minutes, like on his phone or a little electronic device. And why does he do that? Because every 5 minutes it beeps, which reminds him, wait a minute, where are you? And so if he hears the beep and he's perfectly conscious and aware, well, no problem. He just stays there. It's just like another passing thought. But if that beep kind of shakes him out of it a little bit, he's like, all right, well, I was daydreaming, or I was starting to nod off, or I wasn't fully present, or I wasn't working it, essentially, then that helps him. So you might need to find something like that to keep you on task. So the key is always learning to maintain that state of watchfulness, of learning to hold your mental breath, and you kind of have to experiment with what I mean by that. You'll understand it when you hit it, right? And again, the kind of metaphor I've used previously was that of being in nature and looking at a beautiful scene or a sunset or the ocean or light on water. And in that moment, you're not thinking anything. You are just fully present, aware of that beautiful scene. Or when you're listening to music that you like, that's beautiful, that's transcendent. For that moment that you are listening to it, you are there. And that's more of an unconscious thing because it just kind of happens. It's a fleeting samadhi, which are fine. We just learn to have to recognize them, which is great, because then you see how many you actually do have throughout the day. But learning to, all right, now I know what this is like. I've seen it. I've experienced it. So what do I need to do so that I can just push everything away? That's kind of the way I think of it in my mind, and just exist in that vacuum. What do I need to do for that? And when you figure that out for you, and you are able to do it repeatedly, well, then the Kriya procedures, the Kriya processes, they become invigorated. They don't become just a simple way of calming the mind and the nervous system, which again is extremely helpful. That's why we need it. It serves as the foundation, but it's not the end of it all. That's just creating the foundation for you to then start exploring your own consciousness and start exploring your own capacity to exist in that silence, both in meditation, to be aware of it when you're dreaming, to be at work or interacting with a friend or whatever it might be, and still have that sense of, I'm silent. And there's not even a sense of I am silent. It's just silence, which again seems weird if you're used to always thinking about the world as I. It's coming from I relate to the world. But when you get rid of that I, well, then what your experience typically is that of being completely, totally, 100% connected with the wholeness of life all around you. There's no I, there's no you, there's no little bits and pieces of things. There's just the whole, right? And then you live your life that way. So we need to learn to explore how is that possible. And the more curious you are about it, not in a stressful way, but the more curious you are about it, just because it's interesting to you, the more likely you're going to get insights and flashes, whether it's in meditation or taking a walk or at work or driving your car or talking with your mom, whatever it might be. You get these insights and these flashes, and they start to kind of put themselves together in a row, and eventually it becomes this kind of streamlined thread of pure consciousness through everything, pure consciousness experience through everything. And then you realize, well, it's been there all along, and that's the cliche that everyone says, but sometimes cliches are cliches for a reason. So anyway, contemplate this. Think about what I've said. Go back. I'm recording this, so hopefully the recording's working. But go back and think about what I've mentioned here. And when you sit to meditate, or when you're just sitting quietly, or you're in the line at a grocery store, kind of ask yourself, all right, at this point in time, how could I do that? And you might not know immediately, but if you just keep contemplating, wondering, eventually you'll get the aha moment. You say, there it was. And then you say, well, all right, how can I go back to that? How can I expand that? How can I go deeper into that? And overall, you need to let go of all fear around this, because it's not a scary thing by any means, but it can seem that way if you're so attached to your ego or your conglomeration of thoughts and concepts, because that's kind of your normal security blanket. And it can exist without it, but those things can be so persistent that you can feel a bit uneasy when you finally hit that state of clarity, because now you don't know who you are. And it's not that you don't know who you are, it's that then you are completely and truly who you are, which is just simply beyond the thoughts and concepts. So on a relative level, yes, you are your personality, your thoughts, your concepts. On an absolute level, no, you're not. So our intention, our goal, is to learn to appreciate both the relative when it's appropriate and the absolute at other times. And then you're going to more than likely be at peace, except for the occasional bumps in the road where normal life happens. All right, well, let's go ahead and meditate together. We'll begin by giving our attention to our body, taking a few easy deep breaths. On each exhale, feeling the body, feeling just how do you feel where you're sitting. Give attention to your mind. What's going through your mind? Again, all you're doing is observing. You're just looking around, surveying the current state of your relative consciousness. How easy does the breath feel within the body? And if it doesn't feel easy, it's no big deal. You're just observing. Okay. Now we'll begin the actual meditation itself with alternate nostril breathing. So we'll go through 24 rounds of alternate nostril breathing. If you like, if you haven't already, you can switch hands. If you were using one hand to breathe through, to block off the nostrils, now you can switch to the other side to keep your shoulders and hands comfortable. Wherever you are with your alternate nostril breathing, you can conclude. And we'll begin with the life force arousal technique. Now remember, those of you who are unwell or pregnant or menstruating or overly tired or emotionally disturbed, you don't want to practice these things. You want to stick with chanting through the chakras or simply sitting in the silence. That's the best way to approach it. Again, I'd like to encourage you to revisit the When Not to Practice Kriya Pranayama video if you're not already familiar with that. But those of you who can proceed with me, who've already studied these techniques, let's do so. So we'll begin with life force arousal technique. Remember, after you've done this 3 to 4 times, then just simply sit, letting the breath be normal and natural, observing the body, observing the mind. And then we'll practice Kriya Pranayama, again as you've been taught. We'll do it 14 times, and you go at your own pace. Once you're done, remember to pull that life force current all the way up through the spine, the brain, to the crown and the spiritual eye center, the 2 higher centers. And hold the awareness there while you let the breath happen naturally. That's at the very end. So let's do this now. If you haven't completed already, go ahead and conclude here. Or you pull the current all the way up through the central channel, all the way up through the crown, the spiritual eye. Hold your attention in the upper brain centers, the higher brain centers. Keep your awareness there, and let the breath happen naturally and easily. We sit in the silence, quietly observing, being our absolute self. Remember to keep yourself attentive. So if you found yourself drifting a bit, just bring your awareness back to the crown of the head and the spiritual eye center. Letting the breath be natural and easy as you observe and watch and exist as this witnessing presence. Now on your own you can sit for longer in the silence after Kriya Pranayama, but for the sake of our instruction today we'll move on to Jyoti mudra. So when you're ready, you can begin practicing. Again, covering the eyes, not to put pressure on the eyeballs, just covering them to block out light. using the thumbs to cover the ears, to block out sound, to help to internalize your awareness, to internalize your attention as you go through the internal process of pulling the current up through the spine and chanting Om through the spiritual eye. So again, you know what to do. We've gone over this before. So as you practice Jyoti mudra and you're flowing your attention out through the spiritual eye, chanting Om, this is a perfect opportunity to practice what we discussed at the beginning of this session, of learning to hold your not your emotional breath, but your holding your internal breath, holding your mental breath. That's it, right? So as you chant Om, pushing yourself out through the spiritual eye, each time you chant Om, you can have the sense that in that gap between the first Om and the second Om, that you're holding your mental breath, and you catch a glimpse, just even briefly, of that silence. And you do it again, Om, watch. And so this is one way to kind of integrate your practice, your technique, with a method that allows you to start observing and watching how you hold that mental breath after each repetition. Okay, so it's like using the force of your will. Om, silence. Om, silence. And you're aware of that fraction of a second when there is just pure silence after you chant Om. This will start to give you some insights into how to proceed using this in other ways during your meditation practice. So let's continue. For the sake of practice and instruction, you can let go of chanting Om and simply sit with your awareness at the spiritual eye center and gazing off into the distance as though that blackness of your closed eyelids has depth and you are gazing through it. And the longer you're able to sit, the more alert and attentive you can be. In time, you may be able to see a radiant light in the spiritual eye center. So instead of darkness, you see radiance or light. At first, it may be scattered or maybe like geometric colors, but you just have to stay upright and attentive while letting the body, the mind relax. So it's learning to practice relaxation while being awake. And if you can do that, and you can gaze into that spiritual eye center, that radiance will become stronger and brighter and clearer until that's all you're aware of. And you can flow your attention into that. That's something that comes in time. But when it happens, you just need to take your time developing it, realizing that if you try too hard, if you get too excited about it, it'll probably go away. So it's learning to stay relaxed, calm, while remaining alert and upright, and gazing into that spiritual eye. Okay, so let's go ahead and conclude with these Kriya Yoga practices, this practice session, and we'll just use visualization to end our time together. So with your eyes closed, bring your awareness to your heart, the center of your chest, as well as the space between the shoulder blades and your back. And here imagine a radiant light, shining and clear, full of a sense of contentment and joy. On each breath, allow that radiance to grow stronger as though you can feel it moving not just in the heart space, but through every cell, through your bones, through your skin, through your organs, even the electromagnetic field around your body. Imagine that radiance is permeating, harmonizing, a sense of contentment and joy. It's harmonizing the entire relative aspect of your consciousness. Now once this radiance permeates the body, the mind, the emotions, the electromagnetic field. In your mind's eye, think of the people in your life. Those people that you know really well, that you've only seen briefly, those people that you don't like, those people that you do like, any individual that pops into your mind. And that image, imagine it radiant with this light of contentment and fulfillment and joy. So no matter who you think of, when you just think of the people in your life, on each breath, imagine this radiance, this contentment, this joy generated within your heart. It just permeates, floods the image of every individual that arises in your mind's eye. And remember, you're not being discriminating here. Whoever arises, you see them in this radiance, in this light. And don't try to force your mind to think about anyone in particular. Just let it happen naturally. And then let go of this visualization and consider your day, your week, or your month ahead. Just the things that might happen, or the things that you know are going to happen. And with each breath, see the image of all those events, all those circumstances, whether they're good, bad, neutral, otherwise, permeate with this sense of contentment, joy, and self-knowledge, this light that is generated within the heart through this practice. Now contemplate, finally, that every experience you have, every person you see, everything that you do is not of your limited personality, but it is the wholeness of life flowing through you. You are, this mind, this body, this personality is the focal point of the whole, and that every action, every perceived karma is part of this grand design, and that you are not the doer, you are merely the vessel through which all of your activities, however significant or insignificant, however pure or impure they may be, that is this whole divine consciousness expressing itself through you, the mystery expressing itself through you. And you don't have to understand it, you just have to acknowledge it. And keep this in mind after every meditation, and every activity, everything that you do, everything that you perceive. Okay, so we'll go ahead and conclude here. We have one more session scheduled this year, one more online meeting scheduled for this year. If you need more assistance or guidance with your meditation process, review the videos on youtube.com/Kriya Yoga Online. Consider reviewing the 11-hour MP3 course, the training course, at ashevillevedicastrology.com under the Learn Kriya Yoga tab, or the 26-hour Yoga Sutras course, also under the Learn Kriya Yoga tab at ashevillevedicastrology.com. And you can look through the youtube.com/Kriya Yoga Online channel for other videos that I've posted with these kinds of practice sessions, these guidance sessions, which most of you have participated in, but it can't hurt to go back and watch them and practice along with them, because they're not all the same. They're very similar, but they can give you some insights into the process. Otherwise, we'll be in touch soon, and thank you for the opportunity to work with you again today. Peace.